and welcome to Worst Quality Crab, a podcast of Asian American stories and recipes from best quality hearts. I'm your host, Frisia Lee. Joining me as always is my husband, Sam.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Melanie Pochat. She is a stay-at-home mom and a stylist to postpartum parents. She is like me in the half Chinese, half whiteness of things, but reverse, which I'm going to have questions about later. Melanie, welcome.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are so excited to have you here. I'm so interested to hear about your upbringing and all of the food and all the things, because while we are very similar, we are also very different in where we come from. And I think probably how things went down in our households, if I can guess a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
What is the dish that you've brought us today? Paint us a picture. Like, where were you eating this dish? What was it like for you growing up? When were you eating it, I guess?
Yeah, this dish that I have is a very classic Italian spaghetti and meatballs, which
Love it.
feels very different than the other dishes that have been brought to the podcast. So I feel very special to bring in such a non-Asian dish.
No, I love it.
But yeah, my mom is half Italian. Her grandparents came from Italy, and I never remember where in Italy, but they are Italian, so I am half Chinese and a quarter Italian. And this was the dish that she would always make for us growing up. I remember it in all of our houses. She would make this big pot. She had this massive pot that was basically specifically for spaghetti. And it always started with just like the sizzling garlic and putting in the meatballs. We would like make the meatballs together first. Squishing it between your fingers, like the breadcrumbs and everything. You sear them, you take them out, and then you make the sauce using all of the like little deliciousness.
The meaty goodness.
Mm-hmm. And then you put the garlic, more garlic in. There's just so much garlic. And then you have it simmering all day long because the longer it simmers, the more the flavors meld together. And then we would have it for dinner. And then we would have it for like 2 or 3 days. And it was always, it like got better than like as time progressed.
Was this a family recipe that got passed down to her?
Yeah, she would make it with her grandparents when she was growing up. I have it written down in a cookbook that she passed down to me. So like when I got married, she wrote down all of the recipes that she made for me growing up, and then also recipes from my friends' moms. So I have this like beautiful cookbook of recipes.
Oh, that's adorable. Oh my God, I love that so much.
Yeah.
So this is like generations old spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah. It feels complicated because I actually never knew my grandparents. Or like that side of the family at all. I actually don't really know any sides of my family. I grew up in a pretty isolated nuclear family. My mom grew up in Southern California and my dad grew up in Hong Kong. And then they all lived in California. We lived in Wisconsin. It was really hard to go visit them. And when we would visit, it would be for maybe a week or so. Mm-hmm. And they rarely came to visit us. So this was, I guess, the way that my mom brought her family through, or like the good parts of her family.
Wow, that's like really interesting and really beautiful. This is very imperfect, but there's almost this sort of like immigrant leaving aspect to it, and like moving somewhere else and kind of like bringing your culture with you, bringing what you can, and then starting something new or fresh and sort of passing it down.
Yeah.
But to Wisconsin.
Yeah, where most of the food was German. So like we were bringing.
Yeah, so you brought like so much culture then with so Italian and Chinese.
I was culture. Yeah.
So what was it like for you to be eating these meals and these recipes handed down from people that you didn't know and never got to meet?
I think my mom had worked so hard to both make it her own and to honor her history and talk about how she was growing up. And I think like it sounded like really idyllic. This like, cooking in the kitchen with Grandma Ladita and like making these things with like cousins running around. And I think at the time, like when I was, elementary school through high school, like, oh yeah, that sounds really nice. But now, like, as I'm growing up, I'm like, well, how come I never met these cousins? How come I never met this great grandmother? How come that was something that we never experienced? And uh, then having to ask my mom, like, what happened? Like, why did we never see?
Mm.
Like, I mean, I know that my grandpa died, but I was like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
And they essentially like because my mom married someone not white, basically got kicked out of the family.
Oh,
Yeah. And
wow.
so I think that, I mean, among other reasons, but I think that was like the main one, is that my grandpa never respected my dad. And so I think it's super complicated to then be like, okay, well, why do you love this so much? But I think it was like she was going back to a time like that was comforting to her. And like maybe through the cooking, hoping, like trying to imagine how it could have been different,
Hmm.
maybe. Yeah, it's like a little dark, but it's also but it's also I'm like, oh my God, how can, and then I get mad at them, but I'm like, okay, well, my mom made this her own. And now I don't have to think about them, and I can tweak the recipe to make it my own. And I don't include a lot of herbs because anything green is turned off in my
Right.
kids. I had to like pick out individual parsley leaves. But yeah, so I think that's the thing with a lot of the passed down recipes is, you try to it's the inspiration, but then making it more modern. It's mine now. It's my mom's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will get back to this dish, but like
Okay.
right now, what was it like to be Chinese, particularly? I'm sure there were some Italians, but like especially to be Chinese in Wisconsin in I Won't Date You, but
In the 90s. Yeah, we moved to Wisconsin when I was in 1990. I remember that because it was just like such a specific year.
mhm.
It was very odd. Like I felt like I stood out from the get-go. I was the only brown person, and I also felt like I was different because I wasn't Asian enough. Because the Asian people that were there, including my best friend Molly, who is adopted from Korea, are 100% Asian. And I come in and I have a little bit bigger eyes. My hair isn't black. My hair was dark brown. And my body wasn't the petite
Yep.
stereotypical that like every other, like there were 3 other Asian kids in our school, and they were all very like slim, straight hair. My hair was frizzy. And so I was like, I couldn't fit in anywhere. Like I wasn't white, I wasn't Asian. And then I overcompensated by being a perfectionist overachiever. Because if I don't fit into a box, I will be the
Mhm.
best at
Mhm.
everything.
Very relatable. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure to many of our listeners, I could name them by name. I won't right now, but you know who you are out there.
Yeah.
What was it like both in your household and then outside of your household in this sort of like multicultural but not Wisconsin family, like eating spaghetti and meatballs, maybe also eating Chinese food, you tell me, and then like stepping outside of that and being like, it's the land of German food.
It was very weird because my dad worked in the restaurant industry too. So my dad also was a chef cook.
Oh,
So both my parents cooked a lot, but my dad cooked specifically like Chinese food. And my mom cooked everything else. But my dad's food was not my favorite food. Like I can't, I don't know how to
safe
say this
space.
in a
That's safe
way
space.
that doesn't sound rude, but like I just don't care for his cooking, which is very odd considering he works in a restaurant industry, and he also like teaches cooking lessons in northern Wisconsin now. But that is also interesting because I think people take his classes because he's the only Asian person in northern Wisconsin. And
Mm.
so
What kind of stuff would he make for you?
he did a lot of beef and broccoli. He did fried rice. He did like a lot of stir fries in the wok. But he would also make this horrific smelling porridge that just, I don't, and that's the thing is, I don't know anyone else who grew up Asian. So I'm like, there's only one person I've met who knew what I was talking about. And it was the worst smelling. It smelled up the house. Does anyone, did you guys ever
I
grow up with
mean,
that?
describe it, because maybe.
It was like he would go to the Chinese market and he would get like cuttlefish. I don't even know if it was rice, but it had a very pungent smell.
Was it dried cuttlefish
Yes.
that was rehydrated?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like sort of like a seafood porridge type thing.
Yeah. And I think that was his comfort food. Like that's something that he made. And so I was probably a jerk of a kid that was like, this is so disgusting. And he's like, I just want to feel like I'm at home, And I'm like, no.
Well, like with the fried rice and the beef and broccoli, was it like his particular way of making it that you didn't like, or have you grown to like it prepared by other people? Or
Yeah. No, I actually, of Chinese dishes, beef and broccoli is probably my favorite. And I like oyster sauce. And that I feel like embarrassed because I feel like this is the first time having conversation with like Chinese people about food. But like, did you guys ever have ramen with broccoli and oyster sauce, broccoli and noodles? Or is that just like something that my mom and my dad made?
in the soup or dry mixed?
Boil the water, put the ramen in and broccoli in at the same time, and then you drain it, like once it's all cooked, and then you put oyster sauce on it.
Yeah, my parents did something like that.
Okay.
Not necessarily ramen, but like other noodle. It's like a quick kind of chow mein sort of thing without having actually to fry it up.
But I don't know. That was, I think, my second favorite of the dishes that I was going to bring up. It was either meatballs or broccoli and noodles, which is what we called it.
This is really interesting because you have two parents that are cooking like pretty distinct cuisines and flavors in your house. Did they ever butt heads about it, or like were they into each other's foods? Like what was that like, kind of to see them both cooking and receiving each other's food?
Feels like therapy. Because you're like, did they butt heads about food? Like they butted heads about almost everything. They divorced when I was in high school. I'm trying to think. I think my dad ate almost everything. My mom liked everything too. My mom might even like learned how to make Chinese food, so that she would make it.
Oh,
which is very funny to think about. But she was very handy with a wok.
Was there ever like a middle ground of like, tonight we're cooking German food and we both feel mediocre about it or whatever?
I actually can't even remember them cooking together, to be honest. And any other cuisine that was dabbled in was just my mom from reading cookbooks of like, and by cookbooks, I usually mean like cooking light and eating, whatever
Familiar.
was in that, or like from a Martha Stewart type thing.
Sounds like your mom did more of the cooking.
Yeah. My dad also traveled a lot when I was younger. So he would be gone for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. So my mom just kind of stepped in and did most of the things.
Would she cook Chinese food when he was away?
She would if we asked.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why I think she had to figure it out. Because I'd be like, I really want beef and broccoli. And now as a parent, I'm like, oh my God, my kid is requesting a vegetable. I will do anything to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Good segue. You have 2 little kids.
Yeah.
Have they had spaghetti and meatballs made by your mom or by you?
Yes. It is one of the like 3 foods that they will both eat. And 3 is actually generous. I think it's 2.
The Venn diagram of foods that multiple kids will eat is increasingly small, it feels like.
So small. It is like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, chicken milanesas, which are from my husband's mom, and my older son, Freddie, specifically requests Argentina milanesas, abuela milanesas, because when I make them, they're not as good. And meatballs.
So we talked a lot about like you growing up and your parents and food. You are a parent. How do you find that sort of upbringing, these like 2 cultures, 2 parents cooking, how does that play a role into who you are as a cook in the kitchen and sort of like what your family dynamic around food is like?
I've been trying to go back and try to cook some of the meals that my mom used to make, including the spaghetti and meatballs. I have tried to do some stir fries, but I think you guys had talked about this before. It's really hard putting your time and effort into something and they're like, nah, I don't want this. So I'm just like, I'm also like, I don't want to be a short order cook, but I want to expose them to all these different flavors and have them be aware of like their culture and other people's cultures and food and how it brings people together. And I also just don't want to hear whining. So it's like a really fine balance of like, maybe when you're older, we'll get to this. It's like 4 and 2 feels like a losing battle. I do feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to have them be aware of everything, but I also think that's maybe unfair to them and me.
No joke, it's hard.
Yeah.
I think when we talked about food and our kids and parenting with a previous guest, she had like a not yet 1-year-old. And so she was like very optimistic about all the things that she could do. And she's like, I'm going to have an eating buddy and I can feed her all the eggs because my partner doesn't eat eggs and all these things. And now here you are like past that stage and we're sort of like through it and in it still. But yeah, man, it's real where you're just like, I have all these hopes and all these aspirations. And I know what I want to do. Like I know what I want my parenting food style to be, but these kids are not having any of that.
They're not. And I wonder if I should be more firm with it because I feel like when I was growing up too, it was just sort of like, this is it. Like, you're going to eat this food. And I feel like I came out relatively, I mean, the food issues that I developed came on later on. Less around flavors and more just calories. I also am realizing like I don't cook as many Asian dishes because I don't have a wok and because I don't know how to maintain a wok. I think that's also like the same reason why I don't use a cast iron skillet is because it feels like it's a lot of work to do it. And I am the only one who cooks in the house. So I just like to use my nonstick frying pan. But am I not passing on stir fries to my kids?
I don't know. What do you think? Do you want to, is really the question. Do you want to pass on stir fries?
Yeah.
Because you didn't love them, is what I'm hearing.
But maybe I was the defunct generation of stir fry. Anyway, I want to expose them to who they are. I mean, they are Hapa. So it's like, okay, what does that entail? And it's, as I've been thinking about this, it's like, how do I then heal, like, okay, the food journey, how then do I heal my actual like relationships with my family? But the food stuff, it is so much tied to our identity, like, and who I am as a person.
But I mean, I think you bring up a really good point about your kids being Hapa. And, you know, it sounds like they're being exposed to their Argentinian side. They're getting spaghetti and meatball side. Maybe stir fry can just come in time, you know?
Yeah. I also have to remember that they're 4 and 2 and they have a while to go. I don't have to expose them to every international cuisine right now.
No.
I think you can make a perfectly fine stir fry in a nonstick pan too.
Also that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because similarly, I do not know how to maintain a wok or a cast iron.
This is not the season of my life for cookware that requires maintenance.
No.
It's just not. That's for later.
Not to get like too deep into therapy.
No.
And this is not you specifically, but this idea of like wanting your kids to try all of the flavors and be exposed to everything at a very young age. I don't think we grew up with any of that.
No, I think I grew up with like the most exposed palate of all my friends because I grew up with like an Italian, English, Irish mom and my dad who worked in restaurants. And here I am, still a little selective. It's so funny because I'm like, why doesn't Freddie like cucumbers? And I'm like, oh, I actually despise cucumbers too. Like, I don't like tuna. Like, I don't like a lot of foods in general. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter if I was exposed to a lot of different things, which I didn't even think about until you brought it up. We just like what we like.
Yeah. But also, like, I mean, you said you put a lot of pressure on yourself to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like that is maybe a weird symptom of our generation and of like the exposure that we see other people feeding, how other people are feeding their kids and the TikToks, the internets.
I do think that it is the modern exposure of like the baby-led weaning and all of the different ways that you're like supposed to, in quotes, like feed your kid. And like, you don't do purees because then they're not going to be able to like have their jaws be mashing. And I also think it's a symptom of the like, oh my God, my kid needs to eat vegetables and all this stuff, which I think is a trickle down of diet culture and wellness culture of being like, oh my God, I need to eat a vegetable. I need to eat like something green. It needs to be on my plate. At least that's how like I interpreted all of the things from health and self magazines of like, you need to eat all of like, it needs to be green. You need to have a vegetable as opposed to just like what tastes good. What does your body want? Or even the breakdown of his different cultures, including different vegetables. And that's still very healthy. Like a lot of Hispanic Latin cuisine uses salsas, like tomatoes and onions, and that's a vegetable.
Yeah.
But I was like, it has to be green.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up an interesting point too. And to go back to like your dad's cooking and all the stir fries, I think sometimes ethnic foods are unfairly maligned because they are not like, even if they are, and particularly Chinese food, even if they are like vegetable forward, there's still this idea of like, it's fried, it's in a sauce, maybe there's MSG, which is like false. Anybody listening, MSG is fine. It doesn't give you migraines.
No.
It's delicious.
Makes food delicious.
Makes food great, right? But like, yeah, I think so much of Chinese food especially is actually very vegetable forward, and meat is often sort of like sprinkled in, or like you might lead with meat in the name, but then when you eat it, it's maybe 30%. But it's still like not thought of as healthy or clean for whatever reason.
Because it's rice.
Right. Or there's rice. And so, you can't have this carb.
And noodles. Yeah. I think that was the thing too that probably prevented me from eating a lot of Chinese cuisine for a while. Is I had a really big fear of rice. There were a lot of weird foods that like I have recently come back to now as an adult and feeding my kid. One is like full fat Greek yogurt is so delicious.
So good.
So good. Like incredible. Honey, like putting it on the yogurt, like rice. I love rice. Now we have a rice cooker and it goes with everything. You can put eggs on rice. You can do anything with rice. Yeah. That's why I get mad about diet culture too, where I feel like it took away a lot of foods that were delicious and representative of Asian Chinese culture.
Yeah. What sort of just occurred to me is like this conversation is pretty different from some of the other conversations we've had. You know, you said now we have a rice cooker, and we've never not had a rice cooker, right? And we've had other guests who grew up with like a restaurant-sized rice cooker. And I bring this up because I think, you know, you mentioned at the beginning, spaghetti and meatballs is like very different and it's not like Asian, it's not an Asian dish. But why I love that and why I wanted to talk to you and why I think it's so important is that does not disqualify you from the Asian American experience. And it doesn't like negate any of your Asianness, and it doesn't make you any less part of the Asian American community. Which is, you know, part of why I wanted the show in the first place. But it's just this like really nice reminder for me, particularly, and I'm going to guess some of our other Hapa listeners are out there, that it all counts. It's all included. Like, you know, we probably, a lot of us have probably felt that similar experience of like, not Asian enough, not white enough, a little too this, not enough that. And, you know, when I first imagined the show, I was like, I don't have an Asian dish. Like, I didn't even have a ramen and broccoli like you did. That was an option. I was like, I got nothing. I got to host this and talk to other people because I have nothing. But yeah, it's really nice, I think, particularly here in San Francisco, right? Like it's two things in San Francisco. Like you see everybody, every kid is Hapa. They're everywhere.
So cool.
We love it. And then at the same time, like there's so many like longtime Asian families here. And like I grew up here. And so feeling like, oh yeah, not Asian enough for them. Like that's what Asian is.
Yeah.
That's what Asian means.
What did Asian mean to you? Like how did that?
Oh, like full Chinese. Also, like my parents separated and then divorced when I was like pretty little. So for me, it was like two Chinese parents. Eating Chinese food that their parents cooked and like ordering dim sum in Chinese and just all like the very Joy Luck Club experience, essentially.
Yeah. The only Chinese I can speak is ordering dim sum. Do you know any? Know any Chinese?
I do a little bit because I went to a Cantonese immersion school when I was a kid, which was funny because my mom doesn't speak any Chinese at all. And so like I went into this program and I came out speaking like much more than she did, but also like couldn't speak anything to her or my grandparents.
Your grandparents don't speak Chinese either?
They speak very broken Cantonese.
Cantonese, yeah.
Like, Sam, can you even understand my grandma?
Yeah, I can. She's like Toisan, so she has a little bit of a Toisan accent.
Yeah.
So it takes me a while to really understand, but like I grew up around a lot of Toisan people.
Did you? I didn't know that.
New York, yeah.
Oh.
So it's familiar.
Okay.
And Sam, remind me, where you grew up on the East Coast, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, 80s and 90s. Okay. 2 Chinese parents who spoke Cantonese, immigrated from Hong Kong, ordered.
Yeah, I married what my idea of Chinese was. Just laying that out there. There's my therapy for the day. I married the thing that I didn't feel enough of.
I mean, I married into a white family that like is all together all the time. So I feel like, we kind of go, subconsciously, maybe overconsciously.
Going back to spaghetti and meatballs, you mentioned that this is like a sort of whole day dish. Mm-hmm. Does that mean your mom wouldn't make it like once a month or sort of often, or like what was her investment in this dish?
It was probably like every other month because she would also make so much of it that she would freeze it. So we would have it pretty frequently. Like it was a really easy thing to heat up because she also worked. So it was an easy, not have to think about it. You just have to put it on the stove and heat it up. So we always had that around, which is like, I now think about it, it's so funny because she made this. I didn't know that there was actually jarred spaghetti sauce until I was in high school. Like I thought everyone made batches of tomato sauce.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It wasn't until I met my high school boyfriend and he was hungry and his mom's like, yeah, just make yourself some spaghetti. And he like got the jar of sauce and I'm like, what is this?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like the funniest way of being sheltered.
Is your family named Prego?
Yeah.
Does your family label all their jars?
Yeah. The Prego family.
Were you like, I'm sorry, boyfriend, we don't have 8 hours. What are you talking about?
Yeah. It's like, why is yours not in like a Tupperware container? I don't understand. Yeah.
That's
and then
incredible.
I was introduced, like I played soccer in high school and then we would have spaghetti dinners before every game. And then I became like even more aware of the, like, you just dump the, like people dumping the jars and I was like, wow. And then my mom's spaghetti dinners were always just like the best because the sauce was always top tier.
That's amazing. Yeah. I really want to try her sauce now.
I can make it for you. Come on,
that would be great.
Yeah.
What was that like to be like, oh, y'all are just out here getting $3.99 and calling it spaghetti dinner?
Yeah. It felt like you were cheating. I was like, you guys don't get it. You aren't real people. I'm really Italian. I'm like, I was like, I'm so Italian that that I only have my sauce that takes like hours to make.
Yeah. That's
everyone else was faking.
Incredible. I don't think I tried making my own from scratch sauce until I was in college, maybe.
Yeah.
And even then I was like, this is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Like I actually haven't made actual sauce in a very long time because it takes a long time, but it's also very easy, which is, I feel very embarrassed that I haven't made it in a while as someone who is like jar sauce. But now I'm like, I go to Costco and I just get the Rayo sauce for $6, the big ones. Mm-hmm. And it's so good. Mm-hmm. It's so good. So I'm like, this is kind of comparable. And
oh, that's interesting. Because we also get that sauce. It's delicious. Yeah. But I think what just came up for me was like that sauce now is you saying it's comparable. One, I like to hear that because I'm like, great, we're doing it.
Yes.
It's delicious. But also, like in the 90s, that wasn't around, right? And so everything was like you had your choice of Prego or Ragu or grocery store brand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I admittedly, like, I have a real deep sense memory for a good mushroom Prego, and it like brings back a whole bunch.
Same.
But also when we think about like our kids and feeding our kids, like there's a lot of sugar in those jar sauces. And, you know, that's like why we get the Rouse brand or why we'll like make it ourselves. Cause I'm like, oh, I am trying to like keep some sugar out of them. But also, like, that's the sauce I grew up on. But also, like, I was not a real person, to your point. Like, I was not doing it right.
You just didn't. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It would be like someone going to, I don't know, what is it? Panda Express and getting Chinese food. It's like similar, but it's like, it doesn't take away from the experience because Panda Express is still bomb. You know, like there are some things there that are like really good.
Very tasty.
So tasty. Not a true authentic experience, but it doesn't take away from its deliciousness or the memories that happen around it.
Going back to your family recipe, what aspect of it makes it take so long to make? Is it like a very slow simmer or lots of ingredients?
Not a ton of ingredients. I think it's just the slow simmer of all the flavors coming together, making like the herbs, the garlic and the onion. I think that's just like how it is with tomato sauces in general. Like even chili is better the next day, usually.
Yeah.
Because it's just the simmer. Sometimes she would add brajol to it, and that was also delicious. Have you ever had brajol?
Honestly, I've only heard of brajol from Everybody Loves Raymond. Very embarrassing.
You're like, okay, wow, yeah, I guess my mom is very Italian. I don't even fully understand what it is, but it's meat that you leave in the sauce and it just becomes so fork tender and it falls apart. And that was like the fancy, like that was a special occasion tomato sauce. Is when we got the brajol.
Yeah, I mean, you are saying all of the very Italian words in the way, and this is, I mean, no offense when I say this, but like, Everybody Loves Raymond, Jersey Shore cast, like, big pot of sauce that I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the ragu. It is a true thing. It does come from somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I just, in my lifetime, have never met a person. And so now I know you. And like, I'm very happy about that.
It can bring you the Italian experience.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the Chinese one at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but like, I was reminded of your kids again. And like, what experience do you want them to have?
It's a great question. And I feel like I've been so worried about exposing them to different tastes and cuisines, like introducing them to dal and sushi and looking up like West African stews and stuff. That it's like when like I have no experience with.
You're really going. I'm really full.
I'm like, it goes back to like, I have to introduce you to everything and you have to have every taste. And it's like, there's something else I saw that was like, I wasn't a picky eater because I didn't like food. I was a picky eater because my mom was a bad cook. And I'm like, oh no, that's me. And it's like, maybe I just need to go back to what I know. Like, stop trying to force this like worldview and like let it happen naturally.
Do you enjoy cooking those things though?
Not really.
Oh.
Like, I don't love cooking. I cook out of necessity.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing then is you don't love cooking, you cook out of necessity, and also you are taking on dishes that are wildly unfamiliar to you and not enjoying it. Is that accurate?
Wow.
No shade, no judgment.
Yeah, no, it's like, this is the therapy part where I'm like, yeah, Yeah, I think I just need to come to terms like, let's cook with what I know and what, like, I am familiar with what tastes good. Like, sometimes I cook stuff, I'm like, I guess this is supposed to taste great.
Like, but you don't enjoy eating it necessarily?
Not always.
Oh.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
then that really narrows down all the recipes that I cook because I'm like, is this going to taste good? Which is why I just sort of go with like the classic protein and 2 vegetables because I'm like, all right, like this will taste fine. Cooking is hard. And there's just always so many meals that we have to make them.
Oh, yeah.
They're hungry all the time.
The thing that people never tell you before you become a parent, listeners, if you don't have kids yet, I'm going to tell you the thing that no one ever tells you. You have to keep feeding kids. It never stops.
It never stops. And they only want to eat goldfish and graham crackers, nothing that will actually keep them full.
Until the day they don't.
Yes.
And then there is no hope for you.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I try to make muffins and like try to make the snack food because again, like I don't want to give them a ton of sugar. Or I like to basically save the sugar for the snacks. So it's like I don't, it's like that's going to be your daily dose of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also like unavoidable. We got it all the time. We were drinking juice were you drinking juice all the time?
I was drinking juice all the time.
I was a juicy juice kid. Oh man, I missed it so much.
Yeah. I think that's why I drink coffee all the time now.
Yeah.
It's my juice substitute. It's grown-up juice.
Oh boy.
Not a wine drinker. Coffee drinker.
Coffee drinker.
Yeah.
Going back to the spaghetti and meatballs, you mentioned that you kind of cook out of necessity and you don't necessarily love cooking. Do you remember like the first time you tried to make the spaghetti and meatballs on your own? And what was that like?
I honestly think that I didn't do it right. I think I burned something. Because I'm trying to think of like the last time I did try to actually make it. Mm-hmm. And it was a while ago. I don't think I've actually even done it in this house. We moved here in 2019. I think also like growing up with 2 people who cooked so much, it seems like that would, like my brother now cooks all the time. He is like chef extraordinaire. He doesn't work as a chef, but he is very meticulous about his food. He loves recipes. He loves getting to he needs to make the best of every recipe. And I went in the other direction of just being like, nah, okay, like I know, I understand, like I've seen people do it, but like I don't want to do it. And then I moved to New York after graduating college, and you can't cook in New York. Like all the apartments are too small, or at least all the ones you can, but like it's just too much work. And so
they're too small to have a dedicated sauce pot.
Yeah. Like I even don't have a sauce pot now. I think I have like a Le Creuset, but it's too small. So I think that's when I became a parent is when I actually had to start cooking more. Because I was just like, I had the hot girl cheese dinner of like just eating cheese and crackers all the time. And it's like, they can't eat that. And my son doesn't like cheese. So I feel like the last 5 years have been me trying to find my identity in cooking again and in food, of just being like, okay, who am I? What are the dishes that I would even want to pass down? Because I don't know who that is. So this has been a very helpful conversation to kind of to revisit that, to just be like, what did I eat growing up that I enjoyed? Because I do find food to be a really like welcome, loving common ground and a great way for us to communicate and to bring people together. Like anytime I'm at the grocery store, I always try to get like the cookies or the food or like whatever. Anytime anyone's in a bad mood, it's like I always try to solve it with food. Mm-hmm. And I want to figure out what that is that I can make, because that does feel like love, like it shows that you care when someone makes you something. And so I do want to pass that on.
Yeah.
So I think I need to go back to the roots. Yeah.
I mean, the good thing that I'm hearing is you have a lot in your roots to draw from.
That's fair. Yeah, I have. And I think what you were saying before too is that like I don't have to tie my Chinese background directly to my dad, even though my dad is the one from China. But like I can explore that on my own. I can explore different Chinese dishes and explore what that looks like for me. It doesn't have to be just from him, which is sometimes hard to separate that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's, and sometimes I'm afraid I'm not going to make it the right way. But I think that's also my perfectionism of like, just because I don't get it right the first time doesn't mean that it can't ever be good ever.
I mean, so much of cooking is practice, right? And just like trying
Yeah.
it again and again and again.
Yeah.
But also, like, I would imagine, and you tell me, I don't know, but growing up in Wisconsin, where you are one of a small handful of Asian people, like, it is hard to separate your being Asian and your Asianness from your immediate family.
Yeah.
But here in San Francisco, there is so much, and there's so much that your kids can be exposed to and that you can be exposed to. Like, it's a whole new kind of food playground.
Yeah.
Right. And I will say that like what keeps coming up for me is like, oh, get them takeout. And that's because I grew up almost exclusively eating Chinese food from a restaurant, which is a totally viable way to go. But also like now I wish I could cook some stuff.
But there's something to be said about the ease and deliciousness of takeout.
Yeah. I think that what you're kind of naming too is that as we become parents and as we like continue to grow into who we are as parents, it opens up all of these other areas of like, it's not just how do I want to parent, like I want to do gentle parenting, end of story, whatever, whether or not you do. But it's like, what kind of parent do I want to be in the kitchen? What kind of parent do I want to be around food? In the same way, it's like, what kind of parent do I want to be around their education or around sports or things like that? I think food often gets looked at from the stance of like, are they eating enough? Is it enough vegetable? Do they have all this like meeting the toddler, blah, blah, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's so much less conversation around like cultural foods and like, do we want them to know their own culture? Do we want them to like experience other cultures? What's that like? And so I think this is like a really beautiful space for a lot of us to think about in terms of, what kind of like little food citizens do we want them to be in the world?
Yeah. And I think what you're saying about how we want to be as parents, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but since I've become a parent, it's really looking back at my childhood, how I grew up, and re-parenting myself from that perspective of, not to say that my mom did an amazing job raising us, given what we went through, but it's like, so it is taking like, what are the really good things do I want to recreate? Because there was some stuff that was really, really hard that I went through, and I can focus a lot on that of the difficulties of growing up in a, biracial household with two parents who had very different communication styles. Let's just say that. And then so instead of focusing on that, it's like I can focus on the good stuff. And for me, the good stuff was the food. The good stuff was my mom making me sauces, and my dad and I would also like eat crab. That was like maybe one of like the handful of really positive things that my dad and I did together was we would go to the Chinese market, and like there was one in Milwaukee, and buy live crab and make in the big pot, and we would just make crab and I would eat all of it, and it was, my hands stank. So bad.
Love it.
But I was like, that was fun. That was like a really positive thing that we did together. And I think that's what I love about food so much, is there are very rarely any bad memories tied to food. For me, they're all tied to really happy ones. Even when my dad made something horrible, like he tried to make fried rice out of Mexican ground beef. Those are not flavor combinations that I recommend. But like we laughed about it so much. Like that was something that like brought us together. The time my mom messed up pancakes and they were so hard that we were throwing them around like frisbees. Like even the mistakes were memorable.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really lovely. I had never, I mean, we talk a lot about like food and nostalgia. You know, it's part of why we do this, and just having all of these like really wonderful food memories. It never occurred to me that I don't really have many bad food memories.
Yeah.
Like, I think we have bad diet culture memories, and we have like bad other people around food memories.
Yeah.
But they're probably like, if I would have to think really hard to come up with a bad food memory. That's a really great point.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's what I want to pass on. You know, like, what are the things that we can give our kids? What are the happy ones, happy memories that they can enjoy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you picture yourself making spaghetti and meatballs with your children?
My mom's coming next week, and I think I'm going to have them. They're too young to, and they also have no interest in the kitchen. Like, I've tried to get the knives and like have them peel the herbs and, you know, peel the lettuce, and they just don't care. But I think I really want to start doing like a Sunday, like long cook meal where I'm just cooking, you know, and it's like an osmosis thing where they can participate or not, but it's more of something for me. That's the thing that I think I've also, as my kids are getting older, it's like, okay, yeah, I know I need to feed you and you need to do this stuff, but like, what are the things that are going to bring me joy and help me feel like a fulfilled person? Less like about them and more of like, I'm going to make this thing and it's going to be challenging and I can I can make a mistake and teach them about the resilience of making mistakes. And yes, I think maybe when my mom is here the following Sunday, we'll probably try to do that.
Yeah, sometimes when it's a different person cooking, kids show more interest. We have a friend who would come over and just like make a dish, and our kids would help and be kind of interested in doing it. I think she's done it like 2 or 3 times. They just like hanging out and being in the kitchen and working with this new person that's not us.
Yes. There is something to be said for it when it's not their parents.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Also, stirring the pot for just some good old Kraft macaroni and cheese and stirring in the cheese and the butter. It's a great way to get them on the stove, at least for one of ours.
Maybe, I think Freddie might like that. Birdie right now is, he just turns on the stove. Like, he just has figured out how exactly to turn it on when there's nothing involved. So we have to pull the knobs away.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cool thing that he can do. It's a really interesting skill that he's developed.
Wow. I mean, good dexterity, right? Fine motor skills.
So strong. He's just really advanced. He's just like the smartest baby. What can I say?
Oh, I mean, he's very cute too.
Just trying to kill everyone and himself all the time.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I think the one thing that we had talked about is like, so I wrote my entire college essay around like, what's in my pantry?
Oh yeah. Tell me about that.
It was the best way to describe who I was through items of food. And I was like, okay, I see the cans of tomato sauce from my mom, the oyster sauce from my dad. And then I saw like the spaghetti was for my spaghetti dinners. Like, it was like for soccer because I was such a soccer person. And then the fresh baked cookies that I had for the bake sale because I was class president and we were having a bake sale. And it was just like using food as a personality descriptor was so, and I was like, oh my God, it was a great way to describe who I was, like to have so many different facets of who I am. So now it's like so interesting to now think about who I am now. And it's like, I don't have any food to describe.
Well, I was just going to say, if you had to do it again, what would you do? What would you say?
Oh my gosh. The peanut butter for all the peanut butter sandwiches that I make. The honey that I put on my yogurt as a forgiving, like every time I do that, it feels like an act of rebellion against diet culture because honey and condiments were like the added calories that you shouldn't add. You know, it's like, no, that's too much. Like, that's going to be an added 100 calories. And so now I put that on my food as Fuck you.
Love it.
In my cabinet, there are Italian sauces, which include the red wine vinaigrette, the balsamic vinaigrette, the anchovies, and then there's Asian sauces, which include the oyster sauce and the fish sauce. And like those are the only the two foods.
That's all you really need, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the rice vinegar, and I have some curry.
A little sesame oil.
The sesame oil. Yeah, and the soy sauce.
Call it a day.
Yeah.
That's plenty. That's a full pantry.
I can't imagine anything else you would need. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I wonder as you're like kind of redefining yourself now in this moment, like who you want to be as a parent and, you know, related to food and just like refinding your food voice, I guess. I wonder what else will show up in your pantry.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the business that I've started around matrescence and how after you have a kid, you are changed physically, like your hormones change spiritually, socially, psychologically, everything. And I think especially after having kids, you redefine who you are, you refind who you are. And I think this whole journey has been really beautiful of relooking at my past as I raise my own kids and am remembering things that happened in my childhood and letting go of the ideas of the things that were really hard and finding joys in them instead. I feel like food was the next part of it. I feel like I've done a lot of that from a parental standpoint of how I do want to raise them from a gentle parenting and like, you know, forgiving the different parts of how I grew up and reconciling that. And I think this has been a really beautiful conversation to look at what was something that was so foundational and so integral to who I was as a person that I wrote my college essay about it, to then bring that back in. So it's been really lovely and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have to end here. Like there's nowhere else we can go after that.
Yeah.
But Melanie, this has been so lovely. This has been unlike some of our other conversations. And I'm so grateful for that. You know, this I think is just another look at what it's like to be growing up Asian in America and not in, you know, the typical, quote unquote, typical two Chinese parents in Chinatown, what I married into. So I'm really, really grateful to have had you here. And it's been really fun. Where can people find you and your work if they want to find you on the internet?
My website is matre.style, matre style, and my Instagram is Melanie, Melsanie.
Amazing. You can't see her at home, but Melanie has great style. Even before I knew her, I would notice it from across the street at preschool pickup. That's how we know each other. So yes, if you are a postpartum parent and you want to upgrade your wardrobe or just get some help, find her. No joke. Thank you, Melanie. Again, this has been so amazing. To our listeners at home, if you would like to make Melanie's sauce, spaghetti and meatballs, you can find a recipe at our website, worstqualitycrab.com, or you can find us on Instagram at worstqualitycrab. And if you would like to contact us to let us know what you're loving about these episodes, what's resonating for you, if you have your food stories of your own, you can shoot us a message at worstqualitycrabpod@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from everybody. Until next time, thanks so much. Bye.
We never ordered takeout, ever. There were like 2 Chinese takeout places that were like 30 minutes from us. But we only got pizza delivered. I didn't know that you could get like different types of food delivered to you. I remember going to New York to visit my surrogate grandparents, and they had barbecue delivered, and I was out of my mind. They took photos of me because I was like, there are ribs coming to our door? Our door. They're going to ride the elevator. They're coming here.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Sweet.
Oh, sweet urban product of 2 parents who cook.
Yeah. Seriously. Yeah.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Now we get it all the time. I know. So far.
Wow.
She could see me now.